When you hire, do you hire Cisco engineers or do you hire network engineers? Historically, network engineering has been an exercise in memorizing vendor-specific CLI. This is why CCIEs have been so valuable. Additionally, more often than not, your network's single source of truth is not stored in a document, but instead it's stored in the mind of your best engineer. But the work climate is changing. Many experienced network engineers are aging out. The competitive job market is like nothing we've seen before. There is a serious shortage of experienced network engineers, and especially engineers with experience on your unique network. So what happens if your rockstar engineer quits? What will the impact be to your team and to your business? Can you continue to operate at the pace you need to? With Apstra, you can. Apstra's intent-based networking platform is a multi-vendor design, deployment, and operations tool that any network engineer can use. They don't need to be experts on one network operating system, or really any network operating system. They just need to understand networking. And Apstra is your network's self-documenting single source of truth, so you don't need to be concerned with losing the tribal knowledge that only a few of your best engineers carry around in their heads. In this demo, we're going to deploy a new virtual network onto running data center fabrics in 2 different data centers. In the San Francisco data center, we're running a pair of spine switches, a rack with a redundant pair of leaf switches, and a second rack with a single leaf switch. All of these switches are from Juniper Networks. We'll drill down into the stage menu to create this virtual network, choosing VXLAN as the network type, enabling DHCP, assigning a subnet and gateway address, creating a template for tagged interfaces on the leaf switches, and choose which switches we're going to deploy to. Then we'll assign this virtual network to the available server-facing interfaces on each leaf switch. Notice that we didn't enter any Juniper syntax. We simply entered the required information needed to design this virtual network. Apstra will validate that required information as we go, and will catch mistakes and let us know if something is missing before we move on to the next step. Then Apstra will render the Juniper configuration syntax for us. Let's take a look at some of the rendered configs that we're about to push to the network. That looks like Junos. Now I love Junos, but I'm glad I didn't have to type all that. Finally, we'll commit these changes, and Apstra will push the configuration changes onto the devices that we're using for this service. Simple. Now let's take a look at the Seattle data center. Here we're running a multi-vendor network. There's a rack with a couple of redundant Arista leaf switches, a rack with a single Cisco leaf switch, and a couple of spine switches that are running the Sonic OS. Now I don't know about you, but I would have a really tough time configuring a new virtual network in this data center if I had to do it manually. Even if I knew my way around each of these network operating systems, it would be really challenging to have to remember the unique syntax of each without making mistakes. This kind of network seems risky, but not with Apstra. We're going to follow the same workflow that we used in the San Francisco data center. We'll create a new virtual network, enter the same type of information, create the same type of interface template, and follow the same steps to choose which switches we deploy to. We'll follow the same process to assign this network to the leaf switch interfaces, and we're done. Again, we didn't need to remember any vendor-specific syntax. We didn't even need to care if it was an Arista or a Cisco leaf node. As we can see by looking at the rendered configs, Apstra took care of the vendor-specific stuff for us. Apstra gives you a reliable way to make changes across any vendor. You'll be able to hire a smarter, more flexible workforce, hire them from anywhere, and solve the skills shortage problem. You'll even be able to free up your rockstar engineers to work on those important business projects that you just haven't had time to focus on. With Apstra, you can build expert data centers without relying on data center experts.